Hi, I'm Underhiver, and in this video I'd like to show you how to make some wings for your miniatures. I've initially developed this concept for my Dustback Helamites riders, but with some small changes you could use them for a whole host of things, whether that's Vespid or Death Guard, even Mortarion himself if you're feeling ambitious. You could make them more techy to suit like a Marvel Wasp miniature, or hell, you can even put butterfly wings on your Astartes if that's how you get your kicks. I hope you enjoy the tutorial and find it straightforward enough to follow, and if you do, maybe you'd consider dropping me a like or a subscribe if you aren't already. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so materials that you're going to need to make your wings. Acetate, which is a transparent plastic sheeting. It's originally for overhead projectors, I think, which is a very old technology, but I'm fairly sure you can still get hold of it if you need to. Styrene sheet or plasticard, that's 0.25mm thick. Craft foam or EVA, really cheap and easy to get hold of, very useful little hobby tool. A pen that'll write on the foam and the acetate but isn't permanent. And a clear shaping tool. Now I use the blunt end of the small side to inscribe into the plastic. And that's pretty much it, just some glue, scissors and a knife other than that. Right, let's get started. So take your foam and then draw your wing design directly onto that. It may be that you've printed something off from the internet or drawn your own cool wing design, in which case you just lay the paper over the foam and then go straight on to the next stage. I've just done this for the sake of ease. I've chosen an insectoid wing because that's what I've been working on recently, so I can draw them from memory and imagination now. Now, obviously, you may choose to do something more sci-fi oriented or Nurgle inspired. Just all depends on the miniature that's going to be going on at the end of the day. And then we have the finished wing design. I only need one to do both wings, so don't worry about doing two the same size or symmetrical. And then we're going to lay the acetate over the drawing onto the foam. Obviously, if you have a piece of paper, you'd be putting that between the foam and the acetate. Now the foam serves two purposes. It'll grip the acetate really nicely because acetate's a really slippery material and it's going to want to slide all over the place, but the foam holds onto it nice. And because it's foam, it has a give to it, which allows you to depress the lines into the acetate really deep and firmly, and it means that the plastic has somewhere to go. If you were to do this onto a hard surface, you'd get a really shallow line or just essentially scratches onto the plastic, which will really ruin the overall effect. And you can see I'm holding my hand at a really kind of odd angle, and that's because I'm trying to keep the orientation of the tip of the tool facing into the direction of the lines that I've drawn, and that'll make sure that all the lines are of like an equal thickness, and it just helps with the overall finished effect. The real trick is to make sure that you do nice, long, solid, smooth strokes with each kind of movement. Don't stop and start because that'll ruin the effect, and don't change the direction of the tool because that'll change the thickness of the lines. It might take a little bit of practice, but this material's cheap enough, so just give it a few goes, and there we have the finished wing template, and that's ready just to cut out with a pair of scissors, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so there it is, cut out and ready to go. And you can see that the lines that we've created inside are nice and clean and crisp, but not only that, it's kind of created a bevel to the wing. So if you were to do two in exactly the same way, you would have two identical wings, but they would also bevel the same way, so it would look like two left wings or two right wings, depending on which way you'd drawn your initial design. So when it comes to creating the opposite wing, we're going to have to place the acetate over the top again, and this time instead of using a tool, we're just going to trace that with the fine liner. Now when it comes to engraving the other side, we're just going to flip the acetate so that we're drawn onto the reverse of the image that we've just traced. Same process, trace it all out, nice and steady, and then we're ready to cut out and we'll have our 2 wings ready to go. So take your wing, place it onto your styrene sheet, and then you're just going to trace the top end, and this is to create the costa, or the ligament that holds the wing to the miniature. Now you just want to get a nice line, a nice neat line across, because that's going to be the guide for where the wing sits inside the costa. And then just draw a really simplistic shape. Now do not worry too much about how neat this looks now, or how clean it looks, or how cleanly you cut it out. I'm just going to establish a basic shape, looks similar to an eyebrow or the top of a pair of glasses. And again, I'm not worried about how neat it is, how beautiful the design is. You could take your time and do that now, but the stages later that are going to rectify that. So there you are, a very simplistic kind of anime style eyebrow. Okay, so we've cut that first shape out, and I'm just going to test it against the wing now, make sure that it has the right kind of curve. And if you notice, I've left enough material to stand proud, and that's going to create the arm that connects to the miniature itself. So I've used that initial shape as a template to cut out another side to the costa, and then I have a third piece of styrene which follows the same curve but is much thinner, and that'll sit right at the top. So that'll be sandwiched in between the 2 shapes that I actually want on show. So here you can see it creates a kind of ridge or lip, and that's where the wing will slide into and be held in place. So I'll just sandwich the other piece on top of that. I'll glue that on really carefully so not to glue the whole thing together, and then we can go on to the next step. Okay, so I've got the 3 pieces glued, and I'm just going to do a quick test fit of the wing just to test that it holds in place nice and snug. And basically what happens is that just through the force of friction, the wing slides in there and is held in place snugly, but it can still be moved about. And this prevents me using some kind of super glue, which is going to probably fog the plastic. Obviously you could use PVA or something similar, but in this way I'll be able to remove it for painting, put it back in. If the wing gets damaged or scratched or chipped or bent, I can just cut another one really easily using the same template and replace it. It's also a good opportunity for me to test how far up the wing I want the costa to go, and then allows me to make some really basic cuts and adjustments to the length of the piece and the thickness towards one end where that's going to join the body. And I'll show you why we do that shortly. So just some really simplistic kind of butchery cuts. Again, I'm not worried about the final form at the moment because that's going to come in a moment. Okay, this is the really fun bit. So we've established the basic crude shape of the costa, and using the sharp edge of the knife flat against the styrene, just rubbing it backwards and forwards, we're going to whittle the shape that we want out of the styrene. So where we have 2 crudely stuck together pieces that aren't necessarily uniform, we're going to be able to establish a nice solid form from that. So it's going to look like one solid piece of plastic made from the laminated layers of 3. You can obviously adjust the angle of the knife and the piece in order to get a nice camber, so it goes like into a slope from the top down to the sides. And I'm just turning the piece in my hand, feeling for any rough edges, taking those away, and yeah, just playing around with it. I've established it works, I've got the form that I need, it's got function, so I'm just going to take my time and really kind of enjoy this process. I tried using files and sand and paper, but this is probably the easiest to control method for getting that shape nice, and it means that we don't have to play around trying to get perfect cuts from the styrene when we first take it from the sheet. So I'm just testing the wing in place again, making sure that I'm happy with the shape that I've established before I kind of move on. It also gives me a chance to decide how narrow I want the arm to be, so I'll just mark that with a fine liner, cut that away, and then I can whittle that into a thin tube. So now I've got that the width that I wanted, I can start whittling that down into a cylinder. and because it's essentially now just 3 pieces of styrene at that end, I can just rotate the piece constantly in my hand. I'm just trying to take out the thick of it there, but as I start to work it, I'll literally just turn the piece, and it means that eventually I'll end up with a cylinder. It'll be like a styrene rod at the end, where I can just drill a hole into the miniature and glue that in place. Again, just take your time. It's really quite an enjoyable process. It's very messy, so try not to breathe in all the flakes of styrene that are going to be flying all over the place. And yeah, you're probably going to have to hoover afterwards. And then we have the finished piece, ready to add more details to, or paint, or just attach to the miniature as is. You could add more layers of styrene to create a more rounded effect, or sculpt on top of that, or just kind of glue additional details to it. The edge is nicely cylindrical to fit into a drill hole. But yeah, with a very small amount of time, really cheap and easy to find materials, and a really simple technique, you can get some quite dramatic looking wings onto your miniatures. And then it's just a matter of taste, whether you want to leave them transparent or go over them with a paint or an ink to kind of give them a different tone to suit the mini that you're working on. Completely up to you. And here's the ones that I made for my Helamite, all painted up and attached to the mini and with some extra greeblies on. But I hope you'll agree that they look pretty cool and dramatic. Well, I hope you're feeling inspired, and if you are and you decide to try this out on your own miniatures, I'd love to see them. So tag me on Instagram or hit me up in the comments below. I'll see you in the Underhive.